Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. Good to be with you. I'm Don Hudson. Knoxville and Knox County, like so many other communities all over the country, face major challenges when it comes to mental health of its citizens. The issue winds up touching many facets of public and private life, ranging from law enforcement to homelessness to funding for civic services. And later this week, the City Council and the County Commission members are going to get together to talk about mental health. And joining us today, County Commissioner Courtney Durrett, City Council member Andrew Roberto. So let's get right into this. Talk about the challenges, Courtney, that the city and the county basically face when it comes to mental health.
Well, one of the major ones that we're having to deal with is the closure of a long-term mental health facility. We no longer have one in Knox County, and I think we are seeing the repercussions of that right now. We have so many services that are available, but for those who need a longer-term treatment, we have nowhere for them to go.
But even that by itself, Andrew, would that solve the problem if you just have another facility? I mean, how big would it have to be to actually address the issue?
Well, I think having long-term state-funded beds here locally would be a big change, and it would be something that would really complete the continuum of care that we have in the community. I think one thing you got to remember is that, you know, a quarter of us have some type of mental health challenge that we're dealing with. And over the course of our lives, probably nearly 50% of us will eventually experience something that's diagnosable within the mental health arena. So this is a widespread issue, and it's something that we need to deal with. We've probably all been touched by this in some way, whether it's ourselves or a family member or a close friend.
And when you say that, I guess there are just some people that obviously can control or get it, you know, contained, I guess, if they're having mental issues versus other people, and those are the people that we think about and that we see, right? That you say, oh, that person living on the street or can't function.
Correct. And if we have all these services, I mean, we're even going to have a short-term facility for those people to go to, but it's really for only 3 days. And so if they are in such a mental crisis that is not going to be sufficient for them, then where do they go?
Right. And I used to be a police officer, and we'd take people, and that was it. It would be like 3 days, and then they would be back out, and then the same things would happen unless they got into a long-term facility. So I've actually seen it, and I have a relative that I've seen it with as well. Do we have specific issues here in Knoxville and Knox County that are unique to the state?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that folks will probably be very interested in hearing about is that we already do work together, the city and the county and the state. And you know, one of the things that we did was the BHUC, the Behavioral Health Intervention Center that we have. And over the about 5 years that that's been in existence, it's a place where if somebody is picked up by the police, but they're in mental health crisis, they can go to and get connected with care as opposed to going to jail. So it's a jail diversion. And it's actually been very successful, and it's prevented 2,000 or plus people from going to jail. And there's another project that we're going to be working on together that's going to come online very soon, which is called Empath, and that's at the old St. Mary's site, and the city and the county and the state are working together on opening that as well. That's going to be an acute mental health care facility where folks can go as well for another short-term stay. The missing piece is that longer-term piece that we're talking about.
Is this about funding? I mean, if you're a list of issues or a list of things that prevent that from happening, is funding at the top of that list?
Yes, we would really appreciate the state coming. I mean, the state does give us state dollars for our services that we have, but again, it goes back to that facility piece that we are missing. The Empath hasn't even opened yet, and I can almost guarantee that it will be busting at the seams not too soon after it opens. And so really, if we could get the state to help us fund some kind of permanent facility, that would be a fantastic starting point.
Now, I know that you have this workshop. We mentioned you had this kind of a similar thing or the same thing last year. What came out of that from last year?
So, I mean, I think the first part was just getting all of the folks in the room. So we had representatives from all the legislative bodies here locally. So we had, the city council, we had county commission, and we had members of the state delegation. And so we really learned in that first workshop about what's going on, like what's happening. And so, over the last 10 years, the number of long-term beds hasn't changed. It's still about 150, right, but it's not in Knox County anymore. It's spread out as far as Washington County, in fact. So what we're talking about is, and part of what the discussion will be about this time, is whether there's some missing gaps that we've reviewed, and we're going to go over a few things about, what are some of the things that we're seeing in the community, what are the gaps, how do we fill them, and we think that this long-term facility would be one of them. Another one would be like a intervention ability for, people who are experiencing a crisis. So not always is having, obviously going to jail, we try to do jail diversion, but having a police officer respond is maybe not always the thing to do. Right. So the city has this co-responder unit where we have a trained social worker and a police officer right. arrive in a dangerous situation. One of the other things we wanted to talk about too is an EMT and a social worker, would that be appropriate in certain situations? And so we're going to analyze that too.
Yeah, and in that case, I guess that's just who's going to take the lead, because the police officer and social, they can all be there, but maybe the police officer's just standing back to make sure it doesn't go. You have the other workshop, another workshop coming up. What is at the top of the agenda? What will you be discussing at that?
Well, we are going to hear from a slate of different presenters, right. All dealing in the mental health arena, and even a representative from E911 to discuss the data they receive, because it really goes back to what Councilmember Roberto was saying regarding who will take the lead, what is the appropriate response in each situation. And one of the things I feel like we really need to delve deep into is how to figure that out on the front end, so we know who the right person or the right response will be to send to these people who are in a mental crisis at that moment.
Right. You said that you really can't probably be successful without state funding. Do the lawmakers need to maybe change some laws too that address this? Would it help from that type of standpoint, or is that even really an issue?
Well, I think what we're going to focus on is maybe there's a pilot program that can help, because the co-responder unit that KPD runs right now is also very successful, and about half of the folks that they come and meet can actually stay in place and don't have to go anywhere and get connected with care. Mm-hmm. But they're actually running into about a third of their calls are folks that are dealing with suicidal ideation. So you can get a sense for the kind of vulnerable folks that we're talking about. That program really needs to go 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we could use a pilot program to help, advance that, so we could do that. I think there's been some interest maybe from others about exploring that as well. And, anything we can really do to take situations off the plate of our officers who are responding to things that maybe they don't need to be responding to would be a good thing. But keep in mind, we got to make sure that safety is always the first thing we're looking at. So we're going to make sure we're not sending people into an unsafe situation. And so I'm really looking forward to the workshop and hearing more about how the co-responder unit is working, because I'm not sure how much our county partners have heard about what we're doing with the co-responder.
The people who are going to be at this meeting, are they already on the list? They're the people, or is this any room for the public? Can they come to these?
Public is definitely welcome.
100%.
Okay. Do you get a lot of feedback that way that you didn't expect, maybe? Was it last year? Did you have public there?
We did have public there. We did not have a public forum, just really for time's sake, because we did want to be able to get through all of the stats that we were being given.
When, where, and the meeting, just so people know again?
Thursday, August the 3rd at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the City County building.
All right. Courtney, Andrew, thank you very much for coming in and discussing this, and we will take a break and be right back.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. We're now joined by our panel of pundits, political analyst George Corda, political contributor Courtney Piper, both with us, and thank you again for being here. We just heard from the county commissioner, the city council member, about mental health. I'm curious, do you think that we are basically at crisis level with this in East Tennessee? And we'll start with Courtney.
Yes, I mean, I certainly noticed the homelessness population growing and becoming more apparent. My office is downtown. I live in Holston Hills. I used to live in North Hills and Oakwood Lincoln Park, and so that Broadway corridor was my main
Right.
artery into downtown and into my office. And now, when I'm going down that Broadway corridor, whether it's to see friends or for an evening out, I have noticed a steady increase in the homelessness population. So clearly, we are at a crisis level, and something more needs to be done.
And George, your take on our situation with mental illness?
Well, I was thinking about what Councilman Roberto said, and I would have to see the statistics that say half of all Americans are going to be diagnosed with some sort of mental health issue in their lifetimes. I mean, at the end of World War II, millions of American men and women left the service, and they built a country, they built a life. And it's like now that if you served at all, you are suffering in the military. You are suffering from some form of PTSD, regardless of what your role might have been. I think there's a possibility where, yeah, there are a lot of people in trouble, but that we're maybe diagnosing just the people's personalities as something wrong. And if you do that, you are going to multiply the problem exponentially. But the problem exists, and there are some places in the country, Portland, Oregon, for example. I was reading about that today. Their city council passed an ordinance against making it illegal to have these homeless encampments because the encampments were getting so large. So there is no easy answer. We used to have a place here in Knoxville called Lakeshore that had a couple of thousand mental health patients. The state closed it down, saying we have a better way to do it. Well, I've had on my radio show on WOKI, I've had Sheriff Jones and my mind's gone blank. Sheriff
Spangler.
Help me out here.
Spangler?
There we go. There we go.
Sounds like.
Sheriff Spangler on, and both of them told me the county's spending $500,000, and it may be more now, on psychotropic drugs out at the detention center. So there's no good answer, because if there were, it'd have been found by now. And so there are a lot of let's do this and let's try this and let's pilot program this. Sure, but
do we have it in us as a society? We heard a lot of what they were talking about was having long-term solutions because we lost them before. But do we have it in us as a society to do what we need to do as far as money and all the other efforts to actually get at this issue, Courtney?
Political will is always the hardest part of this equation. Because it is addressing homelessness and mental health crisis is something that requires public buy-in and public support, and therefore the political will. Oftentimes, there is a stigma attached to some drivers that cause homelessness, and that would include addiction, mental health, domestic abuse. And those stigmas prevent us from acting as a society because we place the blame on the individual. Well, if you would have never started doing drugs, well, if you would be stronger, if you would have just left earlier. And because we start shifting the blame and the responsibility squarely to the addict or the victim's shoulders, we as society don't think we bear any responsibility for solving some of these problems and helping our most vulnerable populations. And I think what's often missing is that as a society, we are only as strong as our most vulnerable populations. And if we allow this group of individuals to continue to be more vulnerable and to continue to increase, that's only going to harm us in the long run.
And George, you talk about blame, Courtney, but and this is personal experience with a family member, and as you know, I was a police officer as well, and being around people that have mental issues. it's not easy for a lot of people. And is that part of it as well, to be around people that have mental illness, it's just not easy for a lot of people to deal with them and to be around them and to help them.
No, and we had a large facility here in Lakeshore. They had Clover Bottom in Nashville. They shut them both down. So now there's a scramble to try to figure out over a period of years, what do we do? How do we do it? There will never be political will, and there will never be societal buy-in on the scale that some people want it to be. First of all, the political will means how much money are you going to raise taxes to provide all of these things? And then the political will is, I'm not going to push that on people because people will take it out on me at the ballot box. So this is a if that weren't the case, it had happened by now. So there's always a push and pull. There's always a check and balance in terms of what people want versus what they say they want. And no, you're never going to solve this problem with money or politics, because neither is ever going to be there.
All right. Well, speaking of politics, we're going to get into some of that. We're going to first take a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. The Teachers Association here in the state has filed a suit to stop Tennessee's prohibited concepts law. The suit says that the law is too vague. It fails to give teachers an understanding what is banned, what is not banned. The representative who actually pushed it through in 2021 saying that classrooms exist for the purpose of education, not political indoctrination. George, we'll start with you this time. Where's this headed? I mean, what's a court going to decide? Will it change it?
Well, I think it's, for example, I think you can't prohibit a concept. You can prohibit a topic, but not a concept. Concepts are going to be discussed in classrooms. They're going to be discussed by students and teachers. They're going to have discussion during class time where they're going to introduce concepts, and people are going to agree with them or disagree with them. So to make a concept illegal doesn't seem to me to make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But to make a specific thing not something you can talk about in the classroom. For example, if somebody says, we're not going to have elementary school teachers talking to 8-year-olds about gender reassignment, then that's perfectly valid. It is also perfectly valid to say we're not going to have a Nazi teaching a class saying Hitler was actually really a good guy. As long as the teachers are following the approved curriculum, that shouldn't be a problem. But it's going to go to court. They're going to have an argument about it. It'll probably get turned over, that law, and then they'll start over again.
And Courtney, I'm going to let you talk about this, but I just wanted to say one of the things that teachers pointed out in this lawsuit is that they can talk about slavery and became a national issue, and then how the Civil War, things like that. But they're saying that basically they want to say the institution of slavery stemmed from a belief that one race was superior to another, and that's the kind of stuff that they're saying to shy away from.
Right. They can stick to state-approved curriculum. They can stick to state-approved and school district-approved materials, and they could still get cross with this law. And as a matter of fact, that's what happened to an instructor in Blount County, and that instructor was facing disciplinary hearings because a parent complained, and that instructor was using approved curriculum and approved materials. So that is the problem with this law. It's a solution in search of a problem. And the vagueness in it adds just an additional problem for educators. Look, their teachers' jobs are hard enough without putting some sort of arbitrary and vague restrictions where they have to be fearful of being disciplined or potentially losing their license, even though they used state-approved curriculum, state-approved materials, school district-approved materials and curriculum. It's ridiculous. This law is ridiculous.
Well, some people are saying, hey, just stick to the facts and not your feelings. But is it really that simple?
Well, no, it's not that simple, because parents will say, I have a different thought. I have a different fact. And that's, again, like we can use, again, this case with the instructor in Blount County who was using approved curriculum and approved materials and still face disciplinary hearings. So that's where you can get into trouble. Again, this law is not needed. There was no instances of sort of this mass problem that it was seeking to solve. So the law was not needed. It was a solution in search of a problem.
I think, Don, that the law came about as a result. This will make sure you don't teach critical race theory in classes. That was one thing.
But who was teaching critical race theory in classes to precipitate this law?
I know,
it
but
might not have been. Might have just been preventative, I guess, when they.
Yeah, I mean, you got a situation in Montgomery County, Maryland, I think it is, might be Virginia, where the school system. Here's an example: school system said.
But it's not in Tennessee.
But Courtney, it's moving across the country. These things that are said, oh, they can't happen here, wind up being introduced here or being argued.
They would have to be introduced by the State Board of Education and approved by your local Board of Education. So there are several areas that this thing would have to go through before those sorts of topics could be approved to talk about in Knox County schools or Tennessee schools.
Yeah, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to preempt that argument from even taking place, or from teachers injecting it into the conversation as a means of suggesting to a classroom, this is really the right thing to think, versus this is a discussion going on in the country. How you police that is really hard.
Right. So what happens in court? Does it get thrown out?
Yeah.
Yes.
Start over.
All right. We have about 3 minutes left. Going to jump into it because, hey, what would Tennessee this week be without talking about the upcoming special session, since we do every week? But now a Second Amendment advocacy group is going after Governor Lee and other Lee-aligned Republicans that they think might actually flip in favor of some type of gun restriction. We're being told we're going to see a lot of ads on the internet and on TV in the next 3 weeks before the session. Again, your feelings on how what will happen in the session, and are there enough Republicans that they could actually have a law like a red flag law? George?
Well, you've already seen Governor Lee kind of a few weeks ago was saying, well, let's see what the legislature comes up with. In other words, he was saying, I could be causing a problem for myself if I want to do something in the future, or Republicans in the legislature. This isn't something to attack individual Republicans, I don't think. There might be, but I don't think. It's firing all kinds of shots, no pun intended, across the bow, saying, you vote for anything like this, and you can expect this and a lot more of it. And they're going to be mobilizing people in the communities to be contacting their legislators. If anything comes out of this special session, it'll be a miracle.
Courtney.
This special interest group is directly opposed to what is popular opinion in Tennessee. So after the Covenant School shooting, which precipitated this special session, Vanderbilt ran a poll, and it found that a broad majority of Tennesseans support so-called red flag policies. 75% of poll respondents said they supported the concept as a means to prevent school shooting. That included 88% of Democrats, 72% of independents, and 67% of respondents who identified as MAGA Republicans.
Does the poll
say?
So
when you have that sort of...
I got a question. Does the poll say that they know what red flag laws are, or what the details of the law are?
Done. What this tells you is there is broad public support for having the conversation and coming up with solutions. And if you have a special interest group that's going to run in direct opposition of public opinion, there will be political consequences for that. When our state legislature either acts or doesn't act continuously in the interest of special interest and not in the interests of the public.
That said, and since we only have 20 seconds left before we need to wrap things up today, will the special session happen, and will some type of law be passed? Courtney?
Yes.
George?
yes, I think it'll happen, and no, there won't be anything of any substance passed.
All right, there we go. Hey, we want to thank both of you for being here. We want to thank you for watching at home. We'll see you next week on Tennessee This Week.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting.